What's going on, guys? NoNonsenseKnowHow here, and today is going to be some quick to-the-point information on how to diagnose a P0028 code or P0026 on this 2006 Subaru Forester with a 2.5 liter single overhead cam. Consider tossing me a subscribe or watching one of my other videos if this helps you, and here we go. All right, now the code definition is intake valve control solenoid circuit range/performance bank 2. If you've got a P0026, it's going to be bank 1. So of course your first step is going to be verifying which bank you're working on. On a Subaru, the passenger side is bank 1, and the driver's side's bank 2. So that's where we're working over here. If you're ever unsure about which bank is which, bank 1 is always the furthest forward cylinder. Pretty much any engine I've ever seen in my life. So you can see the intake runner for number 1 is right there, and over here this is going to be bank 2 since the intake runners are further back. Next thing you're going to want to check is your engine oil level. Make sure it's clean and up to level. And you know, if it's been 10,000 miles since your last oil change and it's not on the dipstick, you might want to start by just doing an oil change and clearing out the code, because that can definitely cause trouble codes with the VVT systems on these. So taking a look at the bank 2 side and get you a good view of the components. On the back of the cylinder head, this is your VVT solenoid, and this is the VVT oil pressure switch. Now you can see this switch is actually newer, and this is the most common problem. So in this video I'm going to show you how to test that switch. But just showing you here how to get these connections off, since I already have the other side off. You basically squeeze in on there right there. Here's your 2 wire for the VVT solenoid. And then, sorry about this camera angle, guys. And then you squeeze in on here, and that's your 1 wire oil pressure switch. So let's jump over to the other side and I'll show you how to test these components. Not really doing theory on this video, but in a nutshell, when the computer decides to change the valve timing, it triggers this solenoid and sends oil pressure to the variable valve timing system inside of the cylinder head to vary the timing. But not really going into that. We're just showing you how to deal with the code. Jumping back over to the passenger side, I already have my connections off, and we now want to energize this solenoid and see if it clicks or changes the engine RPM. So you can use alligator clips, or you could use a power probe like this, or probably the best way is reaching into your junk drawer and getting some old wire leads. I have this old oxygen sensor lead, and I pulled the terminals out, and then you could take those and slide them right onto the terminal pins, nice and clean. So with the blue lead hooked to our battery positive voltage, I'm going to take the white lead and hook it to ground, and we should hear a click. I'm just hitting it right on the intake here. Let's listen for that click though. Alright, so we know the solenoid is working. In case you're wondering, you can hook that up any polarity direction. You're just energizing a solenoid in there. Next test, we're going to fire the engine up and energize that solenoid again, but this time listen for the engine to shake or change RPM. I don't know if you heard that, but watch the top of the engine. When I energize it, it starts shaking. I don't know if you can hear it or see it in the video, but that means the system is working. All right, now we want to test our oil pressure switch. So I've got my wire pushed onto the terminal. This is a normally closed switch, and it should always be ground unless the solenoid is energized. So let's see what we got. I have black connected to ground. Let's hook this up here and verify that we're zeroed out. Okay, we are. Now let me hook it up to my black wire. All right, while hooking this up, we can now see our problem. We didn't even have to run this engine to see it. We have about 600 ohms of resistance between the oil pressure switch and ground. So that's not good. It should be 0. But if I now take this white wire again and ground out the system, this should go and open circuit. It does. So the switch is working, but it has high resistance. All right, I shut her down, and I'm gonna go sell that oil pressure switch, but let's go check the other side just for shits and giggles, just to make sure we're accurate on this. And using that same lead hooked up on bank 1, the ohm meter, you can see we got just 0.01 K. Let me get that new oil pressure switch. I'll show you how to put that in. To get the sensor out, I'm using a 24mm socket on this long extension, and just lefty-loosey pop that baby out of there. And here's my new switch, so let's test that real quick. One thing I just noticed off the rip here is that it has a sleeve that prevents you from putting the socket over top. So I guess we'll pop that off for installation, because I can't really get a wrench in there too easily. Hopefully, yeah, it just slides right off there. And then I'll put that back on once we put it on. And then let's alligator clamp this to check the resistance between ground and this pin. And we've got, boom, there you go, 0 resistance. Just about anyway. And we'll see what the old one is too. Clamped between the threads and this terminal. We've got high resistance, 1200 ohms. So definitely the problem. Put a little high temperature thread sealant on these. You could also use Teflon tape. Make sure to check down below. I'll drop links to that stuff and anything I use in this video too. Get the switch hand started on those threads and take your 24mm, torque her down. These are 1/8 inch NPT threads, or pipe thread, taper thread. So you don't want to over torque this. Just pretty much snug it down and that's it. It's not going to leak. If you go cranking on it, you're definitely going to snap the sensor off or strip the threads. I'll snap that little protective collar back on. Hopefully she just snaps right back in place there. I had to use 2 hands to snap it in, but then connect your terminal and you're done. You can now disconnect your negative terminal for 15 seconds to clear out the code, which it should on most vehicles, or come in here and clear it with your scan tool. Now, if you found no issue with your oil pressure switch, solenoid, or motor oil, I'd have to say the next step is going to be checking all your wires for any chafing or broken wires, especially the harnesses that go to these to the solenoid and the pressure switch. You'd also want to pop these pigtails off and check inside, make sure they're not corroded, bent up, or mangled, and that your terminal pins are straight and in there as well. Just obvious stuff. So I think it goes without saying that these oil pressure switches are a very common failure on the Subarus and their VVT system. Another thing I highly suggest checking if you're having these trouble codes and not finding an issue is remove this 10mm bolt from your VVT solenoid, spray some rust penetrant on the bottom where it contacts the housing, and you wiggle this back and forth, pop it out, and this is exactly what it'll look like. Now, if yours is clean like this, you should be all right, but just because this solenoid's clicking and working when you test it doesn't mean it's always working. So if you're having problems with this code, buy one of these. I'll plug a link to them down below too, and replace it. If it's all sludged up, you can try cleaning them, but honestly, for how cheap they are, you might as well throw a new one in there. This solenoid is constantly cycling back and forth when you're driving a car, so these do get worn out, and sometimes they can be an intermittent failure, like what I'm saying. I mean, when you're testing it, it's working, but once the engine's fully warmed up, or it's cold out, or it's hot out, it may work intermittently. So you can see replacing these is real easy. It's just that 10mm right there, one connection, and as long as it's not seized into the block, then you're okay. But that's why I say always spray some lubricant before you try wiggling it and pulling it out, because that'll help out. And when you put this in, make sure to lubricate this O-ring with some motor oil so it slides in there and you don't risk tearing the O-ring. And actually, I got to correct myself, because looking back over at the Bank 1 driver's side, you can see that lower 10mm bolt is partially blocked by the cam position sensor mounting bracket, I guess that is. So I'm not putting one of these in right now. I just wanted to show you guys what's involved, but that looks like it might be a little tougher to get to, and I'm sure if you do a quick Google search, you can find out if you can slip and slide that or not. Can't really tell you for sure without removing it though. And I think that wraps us up. Like usual, make sure to drop me that thumbs up, subscribe, or check out one of my other videos if you want to help support the channel. Anything I might have missed or said wrong in this video, I always plug that in the description down below, so be sure to check for that if you weren't sure about something, or of course if you have any questions, fire them into the comments down below and I'll be sure to answer you right away if it's something simple or that I can answer. So anyway, till next time, this is Chris Brown here, No Nonsense, No How. You enjoy your day. I'll see you.